A girl in the shadows of the arena, the skyball arena, was filled with light and noise. Bright banners waved in the air, and crowds cheered as alien players flew across the floating platforms. Skyball was more than a game, it was a celebration of strength, speed, and flight. And in the farthest corner of the arena, hidden behind metal beams and shadowed by a tall pillar, sat a quiet figure in a hovering wheelchair. Her name was Jayla. She didn't cheer, didn't clap, didn't even blink much. She just watched, her large green eyes fixed on the players above as they soared and danced through the air like lightning. Her hands rested in her lap, gently holding a worn-out ball, a smaller version of the one they used in the game. Her legs didn't move. They hadn't moved in years. No one remembered how it happened. Some said it was a rare disease. Others whispered it was a punishment from the gods. But no one truly cared anymore. People walked past her every day. Vendors selling snacks never even offered her anything. Children laughed and pointed, but were quickly pulled away by their parents. To them, she was just a sad part of the background, a broken statue in a place of celebration. But today was different. Today, someone stopped. A man in a dusty brown jacket stood near the shadowed pillar. He had a strange device on his belt, a small toolkit in his hand, and a look of curiosity in his eyes. He was human. And humans didn't usually come here. He noticed the girl. He noticed the ball in her hands, the way her eyes followed the players. With silent hunger, he walked slowly to her, not wanting to scare her. She noticed him and gripped her ball tighter. No one had ever come this close before. "Is this seat taken?" he asked with a small smile, pointing to the ground beside her. Jayla didn't speak. She just shook her head. Once, slowly, the man sat down, stretching his legs, and looked up at the game. "They're good," he said, "but I've seen better." Jayla's eyes narrowed a little, as if asking silently, "Better than them?" "Really?" He noticed and chuckled. "I'm Ryan," he said. "Engineer, mechanic, sometimes troublemaker." Still no answer. But she didn't roll away either. After a few minutes of watching the game, Ryan leaned in slightly and asked, "Do you like skyball?" Jayla's lips parted just a little. She gave a very small nod. "Ever dream of playing?" he added, his voice softer. Jayla didn't move this time. Her eyes shifted to the ball in her lap, then to her legs, then back to the sky. Ryan waited. But she said nothing. The silence stretched long. And just when he was about to stand up and leave her in peace, he heard her whisper barely a sound, "I used to run." That was all she said. But it was enough. Ryan looked at her legs, pale and thin, covered with a simple blanket. He looked at the ball in her hands, the way her fingers curled around it like it was her last connection to something she loved. He had seen this look before, back in war zones, in recovery stations. He had seen people who had lost everything except hope. And he couldn't walk away. "I fix things," he said quietly. "Machines, tools, weapons, and sometimes ... People." Jayla turned to him fully for the first time. Her eyes were wide, unsure, hopeful, scared. No one had offered her that in years. "I've never worked on alien biology," he admitted. "But maybe we can try something." Jayla's face was still, like a statue, but her fingers tightened on the ball, just slightly. Ryan stood up and smiled again. "If you ever feel like talking, I'll be in the scrapyard just outside the city gates." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Jayla sat still for a long time. Then, when the final whistle of the skyball match blew and the crowd cheered again, she looked down at her ball and whispered something no one heard. Maybe, and for the first time in many years, she didn't feel invisible anymore. The human with unusual tools. The scrapyard outside the city wasn't a place anyone visited by choice. It was hot, loud, and filled with the sharp smell of old metal and burnt circuits. Machines lay in broken piles, some still sparking with weak energy, Birds with metal wings circled above, searching for loose wires like worms. But in the middle of that mess, one human worked with careful hands. His name was Ryan. And he didn't seem to care about the noise or the dust. He sat on a crate, his sleeves rolled up, a glowing tool in one hand and a long metal rod in the other. Parts of a broken flying bike were spread around him, but his eyes kept drifting. To the path that led into the city, he wasn't waiting for a visitor. He was hoping for one. And just before sunset, when the shadows grew long and the heat began to fade, he saw her, Jayla. She came alone. Floating slowly in her old hover chair, her hands tight on the armrests. She didn't say a word, didn't wave, didn't even meet his eyes. She just stopped near the edge of the scrapyard and stared. Ryan didn't speak either. He just nodded toward a shaded spot where he had placed a clean mat. Jayla moved there and parked her chair, her gaze never leaving the strange human. Minutes passed, then Ryan finally broke the silence. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Jayla still didn't speak, but she opened her hand and inside was a tiny piece of metal, twisted like a spiral. Ryan walked over, took the piece gently, and smiled. "You brought this?" he asked. "This is from an old war drone. Strong, flexible, perfect for what I have in mind." Jayla gave the smallest nod, almost like a ghost of movement. Ryan sat down near her, opened a metal box, and revealed strange parts, some glowing blue, some matte black, and some alien in design. There were tiny wires, soft skin-like pads, and silver rods that looked like bones. "These," he said, "are protolimbs, experimental, unfinished." He looked up at her. "Serious now, they're part human design, part alien tech I've collected from different ruins." Jayla looked at the parts with careful eyes. Then at her legs. She stayed quiet, but her fingers gripped the side of her chair again. Ryan gently reached out and tapped a pad on her hover chair. The footrest lifted slightly, showing more of her thin, unmoving legs. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. Instead, he nodded as if confirming something to himself. "We can make this work," he said, more to himself than to her. "But it won't be easy." Jayla finally spoke, her voice like a soft breeze. "Will it hurt?" Ryan thought for a moment, then answered honestly. "Yes, but it will also feel like coming back to life." Jayla said nothing, but her eyes stayed locked on the protolimbs. Ryan began showing her how each piece worked. He used small, glowing screens to show diagrams, explaining in simple words. "This one connects to your nerve endings," he said. "This one moves like a real knee. This pad senses your balance." Jayla watched closely, asking no questions. But when he offered her a small wire with a tiny sensor, she reached out and touched it for the first time. She smiled just a little. The sun began to sink below the scrapyard walls. Ryan turned on a small light and said, "We'll start tomorrow. You'll need to rest tonight once we start. It'll change everything." Jayla looked at the pile of parts again, then at Ryan. "No one ever tried before," she whispered. Ryan met her eyes. "They were fools," he said. "They saw a broken body. I see a player who's just waiting to stand." Jayla lowered her gaze, hiding her face, but there was something new in her chest. Something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, as she turned her chair and floated back toward the city. Ryan watched her go. Then he turned to his tools and began. Working harder than ever before, the human was building not just limbs. He was building a future, and in the sky above, the stadium lights turned on again. The game was over for the day, but for Jayla, the real game was just beginning. Wires, sparks, and hope. The next morning, the scrapyard was quiet. Only the soft hum of broken machines filled the air. A few birds circled above. But the sky was clear. The sun painted the metal piles with a golden light. Ryan was already working. His sleeves rolled up, eyes focused. His hands moved fast. attaching thin wires to a sleek black rod. He had barely slept. He had spent the whole night making sure the new prototype was ready. When Jala arrived, he didn't look up, but he smiled as soon as he heard her hoverchair approach. "You're early," he said without turning. Jala didn't answer. She just stared at the strange device in his hands. "What is that?" she asked after a while. Ryan lifted the rod carefully and showed her. "This is your new leg," he said. "Well, part of it. It's stronger than bone, lighter than air, and flexible like a leaf." Jayla leaned closer, curious. "But how does it move?" Ryan tapped the side of the rod, and a small blue light blinked on. "This is the power core," he explained. "It connects to your nerve signals through sensors. When your brain says, move, this leg listens." Jayla looked unsure. "But my legs don't listen anymore." Ryan nodded. "I know," he said softly. "But maybe they just need help hearing your voice again." He set the leg aside and picked up a small device. "This will be the first test," he said, holding out a thin pad with wires. "I'm going to connect this to your thigh near the nerves. If the signal works, we move forward." Jayla hesitated. She looked at her leg, pale and weak. Then at the human's calm face. "Okay," she whispered. She lifted her blanket slowly, revealing her thin leg. Ryan was careful, gentle. He didn't flinch. He placed the pad, pressed a few buttons, and the device made a soft click. "Now, try to move your foot," he said. Watching closely, Jayla stared at her foot, her brow tight with focus. Seconds passed. Nothing moved, not even a twitch. Ryan didn't say anything. Jayla bit her lip. Looking away, "I knew it," she said bitterly. "It's useless." Ryan shook his head. "No," he said, adjusting the pad. "It just means the connection is weak. Let me try again." He tapped a few keys, rerouted the wire, and tried a different setting. "Now," he said, "try again, Jayla." Took a deep breath. She closed her eyes and willed her foot to move. Then just barely the tip of her toe twitched. It was small. Almost nothing, but both of them saw it. Jayla gasped, eyes wide. I felt that." Ryan grinned. "You didn't just feel it," he said. "You moved it." Jayla looked at her foot again, and this time smiled. It wasn't big, but it was real. The first real smile in years. Ryan stood and clapped his hands. "Once, okay," he said. "Let's build the rest." For the next few hours, they worked side by side. Ryan showed her how to connect the wires, fit the parts, and adjust the sensors. Jayla learned quickly, her hands moving with care and focus. "This is your body," Ryan reminded her. "You need to know every part of it." He gave her tools and let her work, even when it slowed things down. Because this wasn't just about walking, this was about ownership. By afternoon, the first full leg was complete. It shimmered in the sun, black and silver, smooth and sleek. Jayla reached out and touched it, her fingers shaking. "It doesn't look like my old leg," she said. Ryan chuckled. "No," he said. "It looks better." Then came the hard part. Ryan attached the leg carefully, connecting wires and pads. Jayla bit her lip as the metal touched her skin. It felt cold and alive when the last wire clicked into place. Ryan stepped back. "All right," he said. "Try standing." Jayla stared at him. I've forgotten how. Ryan stepped beside her, offered his hand. "Then I'll remind you." Jayla took a breath. She grabbed his arm and slowly shaking stood up. The metal leg made a small hum, adjusting to her weight. Her real leg was still weak, but the machine supported her. She stood taller than she had in years. The wind brushed her face. Her hair danced in the light. She looked around and whispered, "I'm standing." Ryan nodded. "You're more than standing," he said. "You're rising." But after a few seconds, her knees buckled. She fell forward, but Ryan caught her. "It's okay," he said, helping her back into the chair. "First steps are always wobbly." But there's still steps. Jayla didn't cry. She laughed a quiet laugh, tired but joyful. And as the sun dipped low, the scrapyard once, a place of rust and silence, now held sparks, wires, and hope. Asterisk, when the pain hits back, the next few days were not filled with smiles. They were filled with pain, real pain, the kind that burns from deep inside and doesn't go away with rest. Jayla had thought walking again would be like flying. She had imagined herself leaping into the skyball arena the moment her legs were fixed, but reality hit harder than any fall. The new leg Ryan had made worked, but it didn't make her strong. Her real leg was still weak. Her muscles trembled. Her body didn't trust itself. Even her mind struggled to keep up each morning. She arrived at the scrapyard, and each evening she left with bruises, sweat, and frustration. Ryan stayed calm, always gentle, always pushing just enough. He set up simple exercises, stepping over old cables, lifting scrap with her foot, learning to balance. Jayla tried, again and again. She fell, she screamed, she cursed, and sometimes she cried. "I can't do this," she said one day, after falling for the 5th time. Her hands were scraped, her knees were shaking. She sat on the ground, breathing fast, teeth clenched. Ryan crouched beside her and offered a water flask. "You already are," he said calmly. Jayla turned her face away. "Don't lie." "I'm not," Ryan said. "You're standing when everyone said you wouldn't. You're trying when most gave up on you." Jayla threw the water aside. "It's not enough," she whispered. "I want to run. I want to fly again, but all I do is fall." Ryan sat down next to her. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "You know, I once built legs for a soldier. She had no legs left after a bomb. She told me walking wasn't the hard part. It was the fear." Jayla looked at him now, her breath slowing. Fear. She was afraid that even with the legs, she'd never be whole again. She was afraid of trying and failing, she said, falling again would break her heart worse than the bomb did. Jayla closed her eyes. That fear. She knew it too well. Ryan stood and held out his hand. "She fell 100 times, he said, but she stood up 101. And she danced at her wedding." Jayla stared at his hand. Then slowly, she reached for it. He pulled her up gently. Her legs trembled but held. "We'll take it slow," he said, "one step at a time." Jayla nodded, wiping her face. The next few sessions were different. Jayla stopped hiding her pain. She stopped pretending she was fine. And Ryan didn't hide either. He showed her how to use breath to calm her body, how to shift weight gently, how to trust the artificial limb like a partner. He even let her fall sometimes. He didn't always catch her, because she needed to learn how to get up. Day by day, the scrapyard changed. Old crates became walking rails. Pipes became balance bars. A metal plate became her training ground. And something else began to grow. A quiet bond. Ryan stopped calling her kid, and she stopped calling him the human. Now, she said his name. And he smiled when he heard it. One afternoon, as she took 10 steps without falling, Ryan clapped his hands. "That's it," he shouted. Jayla smiled but didn't stop. She turned, stepped again, and reached the pipe. She touched it, turned back, and said, "Let's go again." Ryan's grin widened. "You're a machine," he said, laughing. Jayla tilted her head. "No," she said, "I'm a player." But later that night, the pain returned worse than ever. Nerve signals fired wildly. Her legs stiffened, her body shook. She lay in her bed, biting her pillow, tears falling silently. She wanted to scream. She wanted to quit. But in her mind, she saw Ryan's face and the way the skyball players flew through the air. And she remembered the feeling of standing again, so she didn't quit. The next morning, she came to the scrapyard early. Ryan was surprised to see her already warming up. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she said, standing on her leg without support. "But I'm ready." Ryan nodded with pride. He didn't say it, but his heart felt something deep. This girl, who once only watched the game, was becoming a warrior, and the world didn't know it yet, but a storm was coming. The match she was never invited to the city square was glowing with excitement. Bright posters hung from the tall buildings showing the faces of popular skyball champions. Children wore glowing wristbands, and vendors shouted special offers for snacks and skyball gear. The annual skyball tournament was about to begin, and everyone was talking about it. Everyone except Jayla. She stood silently near a large pillar, wearing a long robe that covered her mechanical leg. Crowds passed her without noticing. Even now, even after learning to walk, to stand, to balance, she was invisible. Ryan stood beside her, watching the tournament gates from across the street. "I checked the roster," he said. "Your names? Not on it?" Jayla nodded slowly. "I never applied," she whispered. "Why not?" "They wouldn't let me," she said, her voice hard. "They don't want someone like me on that field." Ryan didn't argue. He could see the pain in her eyes. Even if she tried to hide it, a group of players walked past, laughing. One of them, a tall alien girl in a shiny blue uniform, paused when she saw Jayla. Well. The girl smirked, the broken bird still watching from the dirt. The others chuckled. Jayla said nothing, but Ryan took a step forward. "You'll want to remember that bird," he said coldly, "because one day she'll fly higher than all of you." The players laughed and walked off. Jayla turned to Ryan, her voice low. "You shouldn't have said that." "I meant it," Ryan replied. That night, Ryan sat in his workshop, turning an ID chip over and over in his fingers. He had hacked into dozens of systems during the war, but this one mattered more. He uploaded a new name into the roster, Zara K, a fake name but close enough to feel real. He assigned her to the open challenger spot. No one would expect her. No one would recognize her until it was too late. The next morning, Ryan handed the small chip to Jayla. She looked at it like it was glowing with fire. "What is this?" she asked. "Your chance." Ryan said, "You're in the tournament." Jayla stared at him, stunned. "But it's not allowed," Ryan smiled. "It wasn't," he said, "until I made it so." She hesitated. "What if they find out?" "Then we deal with it," he said. "But you'll have already stepped onto the field." Jayla clutched the chip in her fist. It felt heavier than it looked. It felt like justice. The day of the match came quickly. The arena was packed. The lights blinding, the sound overwhelming. Fans waved glowing flags. Commentators shouted into hovering cameras. The air smelled like metal, heat, and adrenaline. In the challenger prep room, Jayla sat alone. She wore a plain gray uniform, no sponsor logos, no fancy designs, just her mind, and the leg Ryan built. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear. Would the leg hold up? Would the nerves obey? Would the crowd laugh if she fell? Ryan's voice echoed in her mind. "You're not here to impress them. You're here to prove something to yourself." A buzzer sounded. The door opened. It was time. Jayla stepped onto the field, and for a moment no one noticed. She walked with control, each step steady, smooth, practiced. But as she reached the starting line, one of the announcers looked confused. "Wait, who is that?" "That's not the listed reserve player." Whispers spread in the crowd. "The other?" Team's captain pointed at her. "Who are you?" she demanded. Jayla looked up, her eyes calm, her voice clear. "Zara K," she said. "Challenger class." The referee scanned her chip. It beeped green. She was in. The game started fast. Players flew into the air, using anti-grav suits to leap between floating platforms. Jayla didn't jump, not yet. She waited, studied the motion, the speed, the rhythm. Then she moved. Her mechanical leg pushed off the ground with a quiet hiss. Launching her forward, she grabbed the edge of the nearest platform and pulled herself up with ease. The crowd gasped. Another player tried to block her. She ducked under and slid past. Her movements smooth, sharp, efficient. The mechanical leg adjusted mid-air, balancing her perfectly. Commentators scrambled to keep up. Who is this player? She's not in any league records. Where did she learn these moves? Ryan watched from the highest seat in the stadium. He didn't cheer, he just smiled. Jayla was flying now, not in the air, but in spirit. Each movement on the field was a victory, a statement, a promise. The girl who was once never invited had just taken center stage, and this was only the beginning. Asterix's flight of the forgotten. The crowd didn't blink. Everyone was staring at the unknown girl who moved like a ghost between giants. Her name didn't matter. Her uniform had no colors. But her presence lit up the entire skyball. Arena Jala, still hiding under the name Zara K, wasn't the fastest. She wasn't the tallest, and she definitely didn't have the best gear. But she moved with something no one else had. Purpose. Each step, each jump, each twist of her body was focused. She didn't waste motion. She didn't show off. She just played. One of the enemy team players tried to slam into her midair. Jala didn't panic. She shifted her weight, used her mechanical leg to spin sideways, and landed on the platform's edge. The crowd gasped. The announcers lost their words. Did you see that? One shouted she used the recoil from her prosthetic leg to dodge in midair. From the stands, Ryan leaned forward. His heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from pride. Jayla wasn't just holding her own. She was changing the rhythm of the entire game. She didn't talk on the field. She didn't respond to the mocking looks from other players. She let her movements speak for her. And they were speaking loud. One of the star players, an alien boy with golden arm, charged at her again. He aimed to knock her off the high platform. Jayla saw it coming. She waited until the last moment, then ducked low and used her artificial leg to spring upward. She soared higher than anyone else. The wind caught her long hair, and for a second, she looked like she was flying, like she belonged up there. She grabbed the ball mid-air, twisted, and landed hard. Her mechanical leg made a soft thunk as it absorbed the shock. The crowd exploded in cheers. She's unstoppable. A voice yelled from the audience. Another screamed, Zara, Zara, Zara. But not everyone was happy. The enemy team huddled during a short break. Their captain growling, "She's not one of us," she hissed. "She's hiding something." Another player nodded. "She moves like no rookie. She must be using something illegal." They filed a complaint on the spot. The referee glanced at the chip again, still showed green. Valid player, no rules broken. So the match continued, and Jayla forgotten, unwanted, underestimated, stole the spotlight. Even the commentators had stopped calling her an underdog. They were calling her the Storm. Ryan's heart swelled as he watched, but he also knew something the others didn't. Jayla's prosthetic leg wasn't built for extended tournament play. It was a prototype. The longer she pushed it, the more unstable it would become. And right on cue, during the third quarter, it happened. Jayla leaped from one platform to another, landed, and then froze. A small blue spark flashed from her left knee joint. She felt it tremble. Her leg didn't respond for a second. 1 second was too long in skyball. A defender rushed toward her, slamming into her chest. She flew backward, hit the floor, and rolled. The crowd gasped. Ryan jumped to his feet. Eyes wide, Jayla gritted her teeth and tried to stand. Her legs shook violently. Twitching from the overload, she pressed her hand to the emergency reboot switch hidden near her hip. Click. The system reset. The light turned green again, but the pain stayed. A referee approached her. "Are you injured?" he asked. She looked up, sweat dripping down her face. "No," she whispered. "I'm not done yet." She stood wobbly, slow, but standing. The crowd cheered again, even louder, not because she scored, but because she refused to fall. The final moments of the match were fast and chaotic. Jayla didn't score the winning goal, but she saved it. One of the enemy players launched the ball toward the hoop. It was a perfect shot. Everyone thought it was over, until Jayla, pushing past her pain, ran, leaped, twisted midair, and blocked it with her body. She landed hard, her shoulders slammed into the platform. The crowd went silent. Then, thunderous applause. People stood, cheering, chanting her name, Zara. Zara. Jayla lay on the floor, breathing hard, her whole body aching, but she smiled because this moment was something they could never take from her. She had flown, she had stood among champions, and she had proven that even the forgotten could rise. Her name echoed across the stars, the buzzer rang. The match was over. Jayla lay on the platform, staring up at the bright lights above the skyball arena. Her chest rose and fell slowly, each breath shaky but alive. Her mechanical leg sparked faintly. Its systems overworked, but it had held. She had held. The scoreboard flashed the final result. Her team had won by a single point. And though she hadn't scored that goal, it was her block in the last second that had made victory possible. The crowd roared louder than ever. Chants of Zara. Zara. Echoed across the arena. People stood on their feet, waving banners they didn't have an hour ago. The mysterious player with no sponsor, no name, and no background had become the hero. Ryan rushed down from the stands, pushing past security. By the time he reached her, Jayla was trying to sit up. "You mad girl," he whispered with a proud smile. "You did it." Jayla looked up at him with tired, shining eyes. "I flew," she said softly. Ryan nodded. "Yes," he replied. "You really did." The announcers were already buzzing. Who was this unknown player? Where did she come from? Why wasn't she registered before? Rumors spread like wildfire. One of the tournament officials approached, holding a scanner. "Zara K?" he asked. Jayla gave a slow nod, still trying to catch her breath. The official scanned the chip in her uniform. The screen blinked, then flashed red. Unauthorized entry. Gasps rang out across the VIP section. The crowd hushed. The referee looked up, surprised. "This chip is fake," he said. "You're not officially part of any team." Before Jayla could speak, Ryan stepped forward. "It was me," he said firmly. "I registered her. She didn't break the rules. She just never got the chance to follow them." A silence fell over the arena. Then from the far end of the stage, a tall figure stepped forward. It was the head judge of the tournament, a respected alien elder known for fairness. He raised one hand, and the stadium obeyed. No more noise, no more shouting, only silence. He looked at Jayla, then at the screen showing replays of her moves, her block, her fall, her stand. Finally, he spoke. "Rules are made to protect fairness," he said, "but sometimes they protect the wrong side." He turned to the crowd, his voice louder now. "Tell me, should this player be disqualified?" The answer came like thunder. "No." The judge smiled faintly and turned back to Jayla. "Then let it be written," he declared. "Zara K is recognized as a player of the tournament, effective immediately. Her block will go into the history books." Jayla's heart raced, her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed strong. She stood, slowly, supported by Ryan, and looked at the crowd. For the first time in her life, they looked back. Not with pity, not with laughter, but with respect. Another player from the opposing team walked up to her. It was the golden-armored champion who had mocked her before. The match. "I thought you were just a story," he said quietly. Jayla met his eyes. "I am," she answered. But now I'm a part of yours too." He offered his hand, and she took it. The cameras captured that moment, a handshake between rivals. Between past and future, that night, her story spread across the stars. News networks ran headlines. "Unknown girl changes skyball forever." Disabled, no more. The player who rose from scrap to stardom, from shadows to spotlight. The rise of Zara K, but those who truly knew her knew her name wasn't Zara. Her name was Jala, and back in the scrapyard, under a dark sky filled with stars, she stood next to Ryan, holding her old worn-out ball. "You know," she said, "when I sat alone and watched the games from the shadows, I used to imagine flying, but now I don't have to imagine anymore." Ryan chuckled. "You were never meant to just watch," he said. "You were always meant to play." Jayla looked up at the sky. Her eyes reflected the stars. "I'm not done yet," she whispered. "I want to do more. Build better legs. Help others walk. Maybe help someone fly." Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then, let's get to work," he said. Because the forgotten girl in the shadows was no longer forgotten. She was the future, and now, her name echoed across the stars.